It was raining the night Naomi died. Not the soft kind of rain that kisses the earth. This one felt heavy, angry, like the sky itself was grieving. Inside St. Mercy Hospital in Cape Town, the corridors smelled of bleach and fear. Doctors rushed past stretchers. Nurses shouted codes no one outside could understand. But inside room 304, time had slowed down. Naomi lay on the bed, sweat glistening on her pale forehead. Her breathing was shallow. Machines beeped around her. A doctor whispered, "We're losing her." Naomi's weak eyes turned to the nurse holding two tiny babies. Twin girls, just minutes old, crying at the same time. She smiled faintly, reaching out her trembling hand. "Please," she whispered, "save my daughters. Both of them." The nurse's eyes filled with tears. "Hold on, ma'am. Please hold on." But Naomi's eyes began to close. The doctor shouted something. The monitor flatlined. And in that single moment, a mother's heartbeat stopped forever. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the cries of two newborns filled the room. A sound both beautiful and heartbreaking. The rain that night didn't stop till morning, and neither did the story Naomi left behind. The twins were named Grace and Alina. No father's name on the birth certificate. Only Naomi, mother and guardian. They were raised by Aunt Esther, Naomi's only sister, in a small, worn-down house near the old railway tracks of Cape Town. The neighborhood was loud. Street vendors yelling, trains rumbling, kids playing barefoot on muddy roads. Life there wasn't cruel, but it was hard. Aunt Esther worked long hours at a laundry shop. She wasn't an unkind woman, but her love came out as rules, not hugs. "Life is survival," she'd say. "Dreams don't feed you." Grace and Alina grew up knowing this. Grace, the elder twin by 4 minutes, was quiet, gentle, always reading. She loved books because they made her forget reality. Alina was bold, loud, always ready to fight for what she believed in. Where Grace was calm water, Alina was fire. But both shared one thing: the hole in their hearts shaped like their mother. Every night before sleeping, Grace whispered, "Do you think she knew we'd be okay?" Alina would stare at the ceiling and say, "She died saving us. That's how I know she believed in us." They only had one thing from their mother: a small silver locket, which the hospital gave Aunt Esther years ago. Naomi had clutched it tightly when she died. Inside was a folded piece of paper, sealed with wax. Aunt Esther never opened it. "It's not our place," she always said when Grace asked. "When you're grown, maybe." Grace wondered what secret could be so big it had to wait. By 16, the twins had learned to survive the world. Grace worked part-time at a small bookstore downtown, surrounded by the smell of old pages and coffee. Alina worked in a cafe near the mall, serving customers who barely looked her way. On Sundays, they'd walk past the rich neighborhoods on the hill. Clean streets, shining cars, kids in perfect school uniforms. Grace would stop and stare. "One day, I'll live in a house like that," she'd whisper. Alina would smirk. "You mean we'll live there? You dream, I'll make it happen." They'd laugh, pushing each other playfully, not knowing how close their dream actually was, or how deep their mother's secret ran. One stormy Saturday night changed everything. Rain hit the windows like pebbles. The streetlights flickered. Inside their small living room, Grace sat by a candle, reading an old novel. Alina scrolled on her cheap phone, bored. Aunt Esther was still at church. Then came the knock. A sharp, urgent knock that made both sisters look up. Alina frowned. "Who visits in this weather?" When she opened the door, a delivery man stood drenched in rain, holding a brown envelope. "Delivery for Miss Grace Naomi," he said. Grace blinked. "That's my middle name. Who's it from?" No sender name, he replied. Just sign here. When he left, the sound of rain swallowed everything again. The girls stared at the envelope. It was old-looking, sealed with red wax. The handwriting was neat, elegant. On the back, 2 words were written. For my daughters. Grace whispered. This can't be real. Alina said, Open it, now. Inside, they found a rusty old key tied with a red thread, and a short note that said, When the rain stops, go to 47 Rosefield Street. The answers are waiting. N. Grace read the letter twice. Naomi. It's her. Her heart raced. Alina whispered, What if it's a prank? Grace shook her head. No one even knows our middle names. They looked at each other, scared but curious. Alina grinned. Tomorrow, we find out what Mom wanted us to know. Grace nodded slowly, clutching the key like it was made of gold. By morning, the storm had passed. The streets shimmered with puddles. The air smelled fresh, like a clean slate. Grace and Alina boarded a city bus, sitting quietly by the window. The old key hung from Grace's neck on a string. Cape Town rolled by. Tall glass buildings, fancy cars, then slowly turning into quiet streets lined with old houses. When the driver called out, Rosefield Street, they stepped down. Number 47 stood at the end, a big 2-story house covered in vines, its windows dusty but strong. A brass sign near the gate read, Naomi House Foundation, closed since 2007. Alina's mouth fell open. Naomi, like our mom. Grace touched the gate. She built this? The gate creaked as they entered. The garden was overgrown, wildflowers and weeds fighting for space. The air felt heavy but not scary, like a place waiting to be remembered. Inside, everything was quiet. Dust floated in the sunlight streaming through cracked windows. On one wall hung photographs, Naomi with groups of children, giving them food, holding books, smiling. Alina whispered. She ran an orphanage. Grace felt her throat tighten. She helped kids, even when she had nothing. They moved room to room, broken chairs, faded curtains, but every wall spoke of kindness. Then, behind an old curtain, Grace noticed a locked cabinet. She tried the key. It fit perfectly. Inside was a wooden box, wrapped in a faded blue cloth. On top lay another envelope, with their names written in careful handwriting. For my daughters. Open when you're ready. Alina's hands trembled. It's her writing, Grace whispered. Then I guess. We're ready. They opened it. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age. Grace unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was soft, graceful, every word soaked in emotion. My dear Alina and Grace, if you're reading this, it means I could not stay to see you grow. I want you to know. I never left you by choice. Every heartbeat I had belonged to you. Grace felt her chest tighten. You were born on a night that took my life, but gave me purpose. I built this house for children who had no one, because I knew what that felt like. I grew up believing love was weakness. But then I met your father, and he changed everything. Grace stopped reading. Her eyes widened. Father? Alina leaned in. She knew him? Grace continued reading, voice shaking. He wanted to protect us, but when his family found out about me, they forced him away. He left to save us from them. I couldn't tell anyone. It was too dangerous. But one day, you will meet him, and you'll know the truth. Grace looked up, her voice trembling. She knew he'd come back. Before she could read more, they heard footsteps behind them. Alina froze. Did you hear that? The front door creaked. Someone was inside. Grace grabbed the letter and turned around. A tall man stood in the doorway. His clothes were neat, dark. His face, older, tired, but familiar. He looked at the girls like he'd seen ghosts. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Alina stepped forward, defensive. This is our mother's house. The man's eyes softened. I know. Grace frowned. Who are you? He stepped closer. The one who built this house with her. Alina's breath caught. You mean? He nodded slowly. I'm your father. Grace's world stopped spinning. Her knees went weak. That's not possible. You left us. He looked away, guilt heavy in his eyes. No, they made me. The silence that followed was unbearable, like time itself held its breath. Alina whispered, If you're really our father, then why now? He exhaled deeply. Because the truth I ran from is finally catching up. Before Grace could ask more, the sound of a car stopped outside. A black SUV, engine still running. The man turned toward the window, panic in his eyes. They found me. Grace clutched her mother's letter tighter. Who found you? He looked at her, his voice breaking. The people who never wanted you born. But what happened next shocked everyone. The air inside the house grew colder. The man's eyes darted toward the window where the black SUV waited, engine humming like a threat. Grace's hands shook as she held her mother's letter close. Who are they? She whispered. The man turned back to them. You don't need to know, not yet. Alina stepped forward, her voice sharp. No, we do need to know. You disappear for 16 years, and now you show up saying you're our father. Start talking. He hesitated, jaw tight. Then quietly, he said, My name is David Mensah. Grace frowned. That name sounds familiar. It should, he replied, because my family owns half of this city. The room fell silent. The name Mensah was known across Cape Town. Luxury hotels, real estate, car dealerships. The kind of name people said with envy or fear. Alina blinked in disbelief. You're saying, you're that David Mensah? He nodded slowly. And Naomi, your mother, was the woman they never wanted in my life. David walked to the old cabinet and touched a dusty picture of Naomi. She worked here, in this very house, when I met her. My father owned this property back then. It used to be one of our family homes. Grace stared at him. You mean she worked for your family? Yes. She was the caretaker after my mother passed away. She looked after the orphans my mother sponsored. His eyes softened as memories filled them. She had this way of smiling even when life was cruel. She used to tell me, kindness isn't weakness, David. It's power. He paused, taking a deep breath. When we fell in love, my father went mad. Said she was beneath us. I didn't care. But Naomi was scared. She said our love would destroy everything. Grace felt her throat tighten. So you left her? No, he said firmly. I was sent away. My father's men made sure I couldn't contact her. They took my phone, my passport, everything. I tried to find her later, but she had vanished. Alina crossed her arms. Vanished? She died giving birth to us. David closed his eyes, guilt written all over his face. I didn't know she was pregnant. They hid it from me. For years. Grace's voice trembled. All this time, you thought she was alive? I didn't know anything, he said. Until last month. I found an old nurse who worked at St. Mercy Hospital. She told me everything, about Naomi, about you two. He looked at them, tears in his eyes. I came to find you, but the people who run my father's business, they don't want the world to know what he did. Alina frowned. Why? What's the big deal now? David's expression darkened. Because my father died last year, and his will named me the heir, if I stay clean. No scandals. No illegitimate family. Grace understood instantly. So we're the scandal. He nodded painfully. To them, Yes. To me, you're my daughters. Before Grace could respond, the headlights outside flickered. Two men stepped out of the SUV, wearing black suits and sunglasses, even though the sky was gray. David's tone hardened. You need to go. Now. Alina refused. We're not running from anyone. He looked at her, his eyes full of urgency. They're not police, Alina. They're my father's lawyers. And they're dangerous. He grabbed his coat and tossed her a small folded paper. Go to the back door. There's an alley. Walk 3 blocks down and wait by the old bakery. I'll find you. Grace's heart pounded. What about you? I'll buy you time, he said. Now go. They hesitated for only a second before Alina grabbed her sister's hand. They slipped through the back hall and out into the rain. Behind them, they heard voices, men shouting, doors slamming. Grace looked back once. Through the window, she saw David facing the men. He didn't look scared. He looked like someone who had waited his whole life for this moment. They ran through the narrow streets until their lungs burned. The city smelled of wet asphalt and danger. Finally, they reached the bakery, an old building with peeling paint and a flickering sign. Alina leaned against the wall, gasping. What the hell was that? Grace's hands shook as she unfolded the paper David had given them. Inside was an address. Harper & Comer Law Firm, downtown Cape Town. Underneath, he'd written, Trust only Mr. Harper. He has your mother's final file. Grace whispered, He knew we'd need proof. Alina scowled. I don't care about proof. I want answers, all of them. Grace looked at her sister. Angry, brave, and scared all at once. Then we'll get them. The next morning, they arrived at Harper & Co., a tall glass building surrounded by fancy cars. The receptionist looked at their worn clothes and frowned. Grace said softly, We're here to see Mr. Harper. David Mensah sent us. The woman's expression changed instantly. Wait here, please. Minutes later, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes stepped out of an office. Grace and Alina. Yes, Grace replied. Come in. Inside, the office was quiet, filled with books, files, and the smell of coffee. Mr. Harper closed the door behind them. I was wondering when you'd come, he said, sitting down. Your father called me last night. Grace leaned forward. Where is he now? Mr. Harper sighed. I'm afraid I don't know. He told me to give you this. He handed Grace a sealed folder. On the front was written, The Naomi Trust, Confidential. Grace opened it carefully. Inside were documents, property papers, old photos, and a letter in Naomi's handwriting. If anything happens to me or David, this foundation belongs to my daughters. It was built with love, not wealth, protected from greed. At the bottom of the page was Naomi's signature and David's. Alina's eyes widened. They built it together. Mr. Harper nodded. Yes, the Naomi House Foundation was their dream, to help orphaned children. But your grandfather shut it down after Naomi's death. He said it was a disgrace to the family. Grace whispered. He erased her from history. The lawyer sighed. He tried, but she left everything hidden under this trust. You two are the legal heirs. For a moment, neither of them could speak. Then Alina asked quietly, What happens if they find out? Mr. Harper looked serious. Then they'll do what they always do, destroy anything that threatens their name. Grace closed the folder, her voice trembling. Then we'll protect it. Later that evening, the girls returned home to find Aunt Esther waiting on the porch. Her face was pale. Where were you? She demanded. The police came looking for you. Grace froze. Police? Yes, Aunt Esther said. They said someone was attacked near Rosefield Street. They found blood. Grace's heart dropped. David. Alina grabbed her sister's arm. We need to go. Esther stepped forward. Who is this David? What are you girls hiding? Grace hesitated. Our father. Aunt Esther's face went blank. That's impossible. Naomi told me he died before you were born. Grace whispered. She lied. To protect us. For the first time, Aunt Esther looked truly shaken. Then God help you, children. Because if he's back, that means trouble. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the rain starting again. The city lights blurred behind the water drops. Alina came and sat beside her. You think he's alive? Grace nodded slowly. He has to be. I can feel it. Alina leaned her head back. All these years, we thought we had no one. And now, everything's upside down. Grace looked down at the letter in her hands. The one Naomi had written years ago. She traced the faded words with her fingers. The truth will hurt before it heals. She whispered those words to herself. Maybe this is what she meant. 3 days later, a call came to the bookstore where Grace worked. A male voice spoke softly, urgently. Miss Naomi? Yes? This is from Harper & Co. We just received a message from your father. He's alive, but he's hiding. Grace's heart stopped. Where? The voice hesitated. He asked me to tell you to go back to Naomi house at midnight. Come alone. He said it's time. Grace could barely breathe. Did he say why? The man lowered his voice. Because someone else is looking for you too. That night, Grace and Alina stood outside Naomi house again. The sky was dark, no stars, just thunder rolling in the distance. The house looked even older now, shadows crawling across its walls. Grace held a flashlight, her heart beating like a drum. Are you sure? This is safe? Alina asked. No, Grace said honestly. But I need to see him. They entered quietly. The air inside was cold and still. The flashlight beam cut through the dust. Dad? Grace called softly. No answer. Then a sound. Footsteps upstairs. They followed it slowly, their hearts pounding. When they reached the landing, a voice came from the shadows. I told you to come alone. It was David. He stepped out, face bruised, coat torn. Grace gasped. What happened to you? They found me, he said, breathing hard. I didn't have much time. Alina asked, Who are they? David's eyes darkened. My brother, and his lawyers. They want to erase everything your mother built. The foundation, the trust. Even you two. Grace clenched her fists. Then we'll fight. He smiled weakly. You sound just like her. He pulled something from his pocket, a small flash drive. This has proof. Documents, emails, everything. It'll show the world what my father did to Naomi. Keep it safe. Grace took it carefully. What about you? David looked at them one last time. I'll lead them away. You two, live the life your mother dreamed of. He turned toward the stairs. Dad, Grace shouted. But before she could move, a loud crash shook the house. Headlights flashed through the windows. Men's voices echoed from outside. David looked back. Run! They ran through the back again, the rain pouring harder than ever. Behind them, they heard shouting, tires screeching, and then a single gunshot. Grace screamed. Alina pulled her into the alley. They hid behind a dumpster, trembling. The house glowed with flashing lights. Police, reporters, chaos. And somewhere inside, their father was gone. Grace's tears mixed with the rain. She held the flash drive to her chest. This isn't over, she whispered. But what happened next changed everything. Rain didn't stop that night. It poured like the sky itself wanted to drown the world. Grace sat by the window, her face pale under the flickering streetlight. The sound of sirens still echoed far away. Somewhere out there, her father had vanished. Again. Alina paced the floor, her hands shaking. "We should have stopped him," she whispered. "We should have gone after him." Grace's voice broke. "He told us to run. We had to." On the table lay the small flash drive, glinting under the weak bulb. It looked harmless, but Grace knew it carried something powerful. Proof. Something their mother had died protecting, and their father had died trying to reveal. When dawn came, Grace and Alina walked through the quiet streets toward the bus stop. They didn't talk much. The city felt different now, colder, heavier. Every sound made them look over their shoulders. At Harper & Copeland, the lawyer looked shocked to see them alive. "The police said your father is missing," he said softly. "The house was raided. 2 men were arrested, but—" He didn't finish. Grace set the flash drive on his desk. "He told us to give you this. It has everything." Mr. Harper put on his glasses and nodded. "I'll make sure it's safe, but you must understand, if this contains what I think it does, it could destroy the Mensa name." Alina's tone was sharp. "Then let it. They destroyed our family first." The lawyer sighed, closing his briefcase. "I'll contact a journalist I trust. But until this is over, you girls need to hide. They won't stop." Grace hesitated. "Where can we go?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Your mother's foundation. Naomi House. That's where this all began. And that's where it should end." That evening, they went back. The house stood silent under a gray sky. The police tape was gone. Only ashes and broken glass remained. Grace walked through the ruins, her steps slow, careful. She found her mother's old office, half burned, but the smell of paper still hung in the air. Alina touched a half-burnt photo on the floor. Naomi, smiling with children. "She built all this with love," she whispered. "And they burned it like it meant nothing." Grace picked up the photo and wiped the ashes off. "We'll rebuild it," she said quietly. "No matter what it takes." That night they stayed in a nearby shelter. Grace couldn't sleep. She opened her mother's letter again, the one she had carried in her bag since the first day. Her eyes stopped on one line she hadn't noticed before. "If you ever lose everything, look for the rose I planted. Beneath it lies the truth." Grace sat up, her heart pounding. "The rose," she whispered. In the morning, she dragged Alina back to Naomi House. The rain had softened to drizzle. In the garden, the rose bushes were blackened from fire, except for one, still standing, still red. They knelt beside it, digging into the wet soil with their hands. The earth was cold and heavy. After a few minutes, Grace's fingers hit something hard. A small tin box. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was another envelope. Naomi's handwriting again, and beneath it, photographs. One photo showed Naomi and David holding newborn twins. Another showed David's father with 2 men, standing beside a hospital room door. The next picture made Grace freeze. It showed her mother lying weak in bed, and one of the men injecting something into her IV. Alina's hand covered her mouth. They killed her. Grace's heart broke all over again. She opened the letter. "My girls, if you found this, then you know the truth. I didn't die in childbirth. I was silenced. They wanted to end me before you could live free. Your father tried to save me, but he was too late. Don't hate him. He loved you with everything he had." Tears blurred Grace's vision. The words faded in the rain, but their meaning burned inside her. Alina clenched her fists. "We can't let them get away with this." Grace nodded slowly. "Then we'll finish what she started." 2 days later, Mr. Harper called. "The journalist is ready," he said. "But once we go public, your lives will change forever." Grace answered without hesitation. "We're ready." The story broke the next morning. Headlines across South Africa. The hidden truth behind the Mensa empire. Orphanage fire and murder cover-up exposed. Grace and Alina watched the news from a small cafe, their faces pale but determined. The pictures of Naomi flashed on every screen, her smile, her kindness, her story finally told. Then came the footage. David's confession video, recorded before he disappeared. "My father's greed destroyed everything I loved. Naomi deserved the world, not the grave they gave her. My daughters will finish what we started." Grace covered her mouth, tears streaming down. The cafe fell silent. Strangers watched, whispering. For the first time, the world knew Naomi's name. But fame came with danger. Within hours, reporters flooded the streets, police reopened old cases, and the Mensa family issued statements denying everything. That night, someone threw a rock through the shelter's window. A note tied around it read, "You should have stayed silent." Alina's hands shook as she picked it up. "They're still coming for us." Grace took the note, tore it apart. "Let them come. We're not scared anymore." Days turned to weeks. Investigations began. The government reopened Naomi's case. The Naomi House Foundation was officially returned to Grace and Alina. They started cleaning the ruins with help from neighbors and volunteers. The first day, Grace painted the old wall white again. Alina planted a new rose by the front gate. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city, a car pulled up quietly. A man stepped out, walking with a limp. Grace froze. Her heart knew before her eyes confirmed. "Dad?" David stood there, thinner, bruised, but alive. "I told you I'd come back." Alina ran to him first, hugging him tight. Grace joined, crying into his shoulder. He smiled weakly. "Your mother would be proud." Grace whispered. "She already is." They stood there for a long time, the sky finally clear. Later that night, David sat with them on the porch. "The case isn't over," he said softly. "But what matters now is you're safe. The world knows the truth." Grace looked at him, eyes still wet. "What happens next?" He smiled faintly. "You rebuild. You forgive. That's what your mother wanted." Months passed. The Naomi house reopened. New paint, new laughter, children running through the halls again. A big sign hung above the entrance. "Love is the legacy." Grace managed the office. Alina ran the volunteer programs. Together, they turned the broken house into a place full of hope. One afternoon, as Grace sat by the window finishing paperwork, she noticed the sky turning golden. The garden outside was alive again. Roses bloomed where ashes once lay. She opened her mother's letter one last time, tracing the final line. "When the rain stops, you'll understand why I smiled even when it hurt." Grace smiled through tears. "I do now, Mom. I really do." She walked outside where Alina was playing with the children. They laughed, chasing each other through the grass. The sound of their laughter rose into the sky, pure, alive, full of peace. Grace looked up at the clouds. The rain had stopped long ago, but its memory still shimmered on the petals. For the first time, she felt no pain, only gratitude. She whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for everything you left behind." And as the wind passed through the roses, it almost felt like Naomi was there, smiling with them. If this story touched your heart, stay close and subscribe for more. The sound of laughter filled Naomi House again. Months had passed since the truth came out, and Cape Town had almost healed from the storm her story left behind. Reporters moved on. The police had made arrests, and Grace and Alina, were finally living the life their mother had dreamed of. Every morning, Grace opened the old wooden gates of the orphanage. Children ran past her with books and bread, their laughter echoing across the yard. The air smelled like fresh paint and hope. Alina spent her days organizing supplies, cooking for the kids, and sometimes yelling at them with a soft heart. She'd pretend to be tough, but everyone knew she couldn't stay mad. The children loved her the most. Their father, David, came often now. He still limped a little, but he was alive and free. The government had cleared his name after the investigation proved what Naomi's letter revealed, that he had tried to expose his father's crimes years ago. Grace would sometimes watch him from the window as he helped repair the garden. He looked older, slower, but at peace. One evening, he found Grace sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in gold and pink, and the air smelled of rain that had just passed. "You're quiet," he said, sitting beside her. Grace smiled faintly. "It feels strange, you know? For so long, we didn't know who we were. And now, everyone does." He nodded slowly. "Truth comes with a price, but it also brings freedom." Grace looked at him, eyes soft. "Do you ever think Mom planned all of this?" He smiled sadly. She always saw further than anyone else. She knew pain couldn't stay forever. The silence between them was warm this time. Not heavy, not broken, just still. When Alina came out, she handed her father a cup of tea. "We're reopening the main hall next week. The mayor's coming too." David chuckled. "Your mother would have laughed at that. She never cared about titles." Alina grinned. Well, now her story matters to everyone. But not everyone was happy about it. Across the city, in a tall glass building overlooking the sea, Victor Mensah, David's younger brother, sat behind a polished desk. His face was sharp, cold, and unreadable. On the wall hung a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Mensah Empire Under Investigation." He tore it down, his jaw tight. A man in a suit entered quietly. "Sir, the press is still calling. They want comments about the Naomi Trust case." Victor didn't look up. "Tell them my brother can keep his orphanage. I have bigger things to handle." The man hesitated. "There's more, sir. The foundation is becoming popular. Donations are rising fast. They're getting attention from international groups." Victor turned, his eyes narrowing. "You're saying Naomi's daughters are building something from the ashes of my company's shame?" "Yes, sir." Victor stood, his voice low. Then it's time someone reminded them where they came from. 2 weeks later, Naomi House buzzed with excitement. The main hall reopening was a big deal. The mayor, a few sponsors, and several journalists were attending. Grace wore a simple blue dress. Alina had tied her hair back, her hands shaking slightly as she arranged the flowers. David looked proud. "You girls did it," he said. Grace smiled softly. "Mom did. We just followed her map." The ceremony began. Speeches, claps, laughter. Grace stepped on stage to speak. "Naomi House isn't just a building," she said, her voice steady. "It's a promise that love doesn't die with loss. My mother believed that every child deserves a place to belong. And today, we're keeping that alive." The crowd clapped. Cameras flashed. Alina's eyes filled with tears as she watched her sister speak. But outside, near the gate, a black car stopped. A man stepped out in a gray suit. Victor. He didn't smile. He just stared at the banner that read, "Love is the legacy." Then he walked inside. When Grace finished her speech, Victor clapped slowly. The sound made everyone turn. David's smile faded. "What are you doing here, Victor?" "Celebrating family," Victor said, his tone mocking. "You didn't invite me, brother. I had to see what all the noise was about." Grace's heartbeat quickened. She had never seen him before, but the resemblance was clear. Same jawline, same eyes, except colder. Victor looked around. So this is Naomi's legacy? An orphanage in the slums? How touching. David stepped forward. You have no right to be here. Victor smiled thinly. Oh, but I do. You used company funds to build this place years ago, remember? Legally, it still belongs to Mensa Holdings. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters lifted their cameras again. Grace's stomach dropped. That's not true, she said. Victor turned toward her. And you must be Grace. You inherited your mother's fire. Let's see if it burns as bright when the papers hit tomorrow. Alina clenched her fists. You can't take this from us. He leaned closer, smirking. Everything has a price, even love. David's voice hardened. Leave before I make you. Victor's smile faded. You can't protect them forever, brother. I built my life from power. You built yours from guilt. Guess which one lasts longer? He turned and walked out as the cameras flashed. The damage was done. The next morning, the newspapers exploded with new headlines. Ownership dispute over Naomi House Foundation. Mensa brothers clash over legacy and wealth. Reporters surrounded the gates. Sponsors froze their donations. Government offices called for an audit. Grace sat in her office, staring at her phone. He's trying to destroy us. David nodded grimly. He's twisting the truth. We did use Mensa funds, but they were my personal share. Still, the documents won't show that. Alina slammed her hands on the table. Then we'll show them proof. Grace looked up. We don't have any. Not yet. David sighed heavily. There's only one person who can help us now. Grace frowned. Who? Your grandmother. Both sisters went silent. They had never heard that word spoken before. David looked distant. She's the one who knew everything. She helped Naomi hide the money before my father found out. She's been silent all these years. Grace whispered. Where is she now? Living in a care home outside the city? Alina stood. Then we go to her. The care home sat near the mountains, surrounded by quiet gardens and tall pines. The air smelled clean, like rain and lavender. Inside, an old woman sat by the window knitting slowly. Her hair was silver, her eyes soft but sharp. When she saw David, her hands froze. You finally brought them, she said quietly. Grace stepped forward. You knew about us? The woman smiled faintly. I knew about you before you were born. Naomi came to me when she was scared. She said she wanted her daughters to live free of the Mensa curse. Tears welled in David's eyes. Mother, Victor is trying to take everything. I know, she said. He came here 2 days ago. Grace's heart raced. What did he want? To find the papers Naomi gave me. Alina frowned. Papers? The old woman opened a drawer beside her and pulled out an envelope. Your mother was clever. She made 2 copies of every file. She said if her daughters ever came looking, I should give them this. Grace took the envelope slowly. Inside were signed documents, bank statements, receipts, a will addendum naming Naomi and David as joint owners of the trust. Grace's breath caught. This proves everything. The old woman smiled softly. She always thought ahead. Love makes you brave. David kissed his mother's hand. Thank you. The woman looked out the window. Promise me one thing. Don't fight like he did. Win with truth, not anger. Grace nodded, tears shining in her eyes. I promise. 3 days later, they stood in court. Reporters filled the benches. Victor sat across the room, calm and cold. The judge looked through the files. Grace's hands shook as she watched. Mr. Harper stood for them. Your Honor, these documents prove that Naomi House was legally established as a separate trust. funded by David Mensah's personal assets and Naomi's savings. It was never a part of Mensah Holdings. Victor's lawyer stood. Forged papers, old stories. But then the judge lifted a photo attached to the file. Naomi and David standing before the house, holding the original deed, both signatures clear. The room went silent. Finally, the judge said, "Case dismissed. The Naomi House Foundation belongs to Grace and Alina Naomi Mensah." The sisters froze. For a moment, neither could breathe. Then Alina grabbed Grace's hand, laughing and crying at once. David closed his eyes, relief washing over his face. Victor stood quietly, his jaw clenched. "You think you've won?" he said. Grace looked him in the eye. "We didn't win. The truth did." He walked out without another word. Later that evening, Naomi House was quiet again. The sunset painted the walls gold. The air felt lighter. Grace sat in her mother's old chair, holding the court paper. "It's over," she whispered. David smiled faintly. "It's just beginning." Alina came in, wiping her eyes. "We're free now." Grace nodded slowly. "No, Alina, we're not just free. We're complete." Outside, the children sang as they watered the roses, the same rose garden where everything had once ended, and now began again. Grace walked outside, looking at the flowers swaying in the evening wind. She touched the red petals, remembering her mother's words. "When the rain stops, the truth will bloom." For the first time, she felt peace settle inside her like sunlight. If this story moved you, stay close and subscribe for more. The sun rose over Cape Town like it was painting a new world. The sky was calm, golden, and soft. For the first time in years, Naomi House stood in full peace. The gates were open. The walls gleamed white. The air smelled of roses and rain. Grace walked through the yard with a notebook in her hand. Children ran past her, chasing each other through puddles. Their laughter mixed with the songs of morning birds. She smiled. Every sound felt alive. Every corner of this place carried her mother's name. Inside, Alina arranged breakfast with 2 volunteers. She hummed softly, her energy bright. Even the walls seemed to listen. "We're short on milk again," she said, laughing. "These kids eat like a football team." Grace chuckled. "That's a good problem." David came out of the office wearing his usual blue shirt and a tired smile. "Good morning, my girls." "Morning, Dad," they said together. He sat at the wooden table, watching the children eat. "You know," he said, "I used to think happiness meant power, but it looks like I had it wrong all along." Grace smiled. "Mom tried to tell you that." He nodded, eyes warm. "And now her daughters remind me every day." The sound of laughter filled the room again. It was simple, real, and perfect. For the first time, the Naomi House Foundation wasn't just surviving, it was growing. Donations had restarted. Local schools sent volunteers every week. And after the court case, hundreds of people had written letters saying Naomi's story inspired them to do good. Still, Grace felt something missing. Every time she walked through the garden, every time she saw her mother's old photo on the wall, a question remained in her heart. What did she truly want for us? One afternoon, Grace sat by the window, flipping through Naomi's old files. A small folded note fell out. On it, her mother's handwriting read, "For my daughters, when you're no longer fighting, start living." Grace stared at those words for a long time. Then she smiled softly. That evening, she gathered Alina and David. "It's time," she said. Alina frowned. "Time for what?" Grace looked around the bright hall full of children. "To finish what Mom started, not just to rebuild Naomi House, but to expand it, make it bigger, make it reach more hearts." David raised his brows. You want to open new centers? Grace nodded. Yes, across Africa. Every city, every village that needs help. We'll bring her story there. Alina's smile widened. We'll need sponsors, staff, everything. Grace's eyes sparkled. We'll figure it out. That's what Mom did. David leaned back, pride in his voice. Naomi's dream is alive again. Weeks passed. Plans grew. Grace handled paperwork, meetings and budgets. Alina managed supplies and volunteers. David handled public talks and media. One evening, Grace was invited to speak at a charity event in Johannesburg. The hall was grand. Chandeliers, velvet curtains, people in suits. Cameras clicked as she walked to the stage. When she began speaking, the room went silent. My name is Grace Naomi Mensah. My mother's life was short, but her heart was endless. She believed that kindness doesn't end with one person. It multiplies. Today, we carry her dream forward, not as a story of pain, but of power. The crowd clapped. Some even stood. A few older women wiped tears. After the event, a tall woman approached her. Grace, I'm from an American charity group, she said. Your story has reached us. We want to help expand Naomi House to the United States. Grace's breath caught. Are you serious? The woman smiled. Very. Naomi's message deserves the world. Grace shook her hand. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. That night, Grace called Alina. You won't believe this, she said excitedly. They want to partner with us. We could open Naomi House branches in the U.S. Alina's laugh was full of joy. Mom's story going worldwide? That's insane. In a good way. David's voice came from the background. Your mother would be dancing right now. Grace laughed softly. I can almost hear her. Months rolled into a year. The Naomi House name began spreading beyond Africa. News outlets called it the Miracle of Mercy Street. Schools raised money. Hospitals sent donations. Even artists painted murals of Naomi's smile across city walls. Grace traveled often. Kenya, Ghana, even New York. Everywhere she went, she told the same story. A woman who died giving birth but left behind something stronger than life. A legacy of love. One evening, while flying back from a conference, Grace sat by the window of the plane, staring at the clouds glowing orange under the sunset. She whispered, We did it, Mom. When she landed, she called Alina immediately. I'm coming home tomorrow. We have something big to announce. Alina's voice sounded tired but happy. Can't wait. Oh, and Dad's been working on something secret. Don't ask. He won't tell me either. Grace smiled. Secrets run in this family. The next morning, she arrived at Naomi House. The kids ran to hug her. Alina waved from the garden. Welcome back, superstar. Grace laughed, hugging her tight. Missed you too. David stood by the new rose bush, holding a folder. Perfect timing, he said. There's something you both should see. They sat in the office. David opened the folder, revealing a small stack of letters. These came last week, he said. From women in the U.S., Nigeria, and France. They all say Naomi's story changed their lives. Some want to volunteer. Some want to start orphanages under her name. Grace read one aloud. Dear Naomi's daughters, your mother gave me strength to forgive myself and start again. Her story made me believe in love again. Alina wiped her eyes. She's touching lives even now. David nodded slowly. And there's one more thing. He handed Grace a small envelope sealed in wax. This was hidden in Naomi's old Bible. I found it last week. Grace carefully opened it. Inside was a short, handwritten note. If love survives, plant a tree for me. Not where I died, but where you live. Underneath was a small drawing of a tree, its roots spreading into hearts. Grace felt her throat tighten. She wanted to be remembered in life, not death. Alina smiled through tears. Then let's do it. The next day, everyone gathered outside Naomi's house. Children, volunteers, neighbors, all stood around a small patch of soil near the entrance. Grace held a young sapling in her hands. Its leaves were small and green, trembling in the soft wind. She looked up at the sky. "Mom, this one's for you." Together, Grace, Alina, and David planted the tree. The children clapped. Some threw flower petals on the ground. As the roots settled into the earth, Grace whispered, "May it grow as strong as your love." The sun broke through the clouds right then, lighting the house in gold. Everyone smiled. For a moment, it felt like Naomi herself was standing there, smiling back. Weeks later, Grace received a call from the American charity director. "We're ready," she said. "The first Naomi house in the U.S. opens next month." Grace couldn't hold back tears. Mom's story made it across the ocean. Alina laughed in the background. The world's about to meet Naomi. Months passed again. The U.S. branch opened in Atlanta. Grace traveled there with David for the ceremony. The crowd was huge. Families, children, even local news crews. The air buzzed with energy. Grace stood before the microphone, heart pounding. "This isn't about money," she said. "It's about memory. About a woman who believed love could rebuild broken hearts. My mother's name is Naomi Mensah, and this house is her heartbeat." The crowd erupted in applause. David stood quietly beside her, tears glimmering in his eyes. "She'd be so proud," he whispered. Grace smiled. "She's here, in every brick, every child, every heartbeat." That night, after the event, they walked through the empty hall. The walls were bright white, the floors shining. Grace could hear faint laughter echoing from the children's rooms. She looked at her father. "You know, I used to hate the rain," she said softly. "It reminded me of the night she died. But now, it reminds me of how everything grew from it." David nodded, voice low. "Your mother once told me rain doesn't just wash things away. It wakes them up." Grace smiled faintly. "Then I hope it never stops raining." They both laughed quietly. Back in Cape Town months later, Alina stood in the garden where the tree had been planted. It had grown taller already, its leaves wide and green. Children played under it, their laughter rising into the sky. Grace joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "Look at it. It's growing faster than we expected." Alina smiled. "Just like us." Grace nodded. "You know, sometimes I wonder if we were meant to find that letter, or if she guided us." Alina looked up at the tree. "Maybe both." They stood there silently for a while. Then Grace whispered, "Do you ever miss her?" "Every day," Alina said. "But I feel her everywhere. In the kids, in the air, in this tree." Grace smiled softly. Then she never really left. Later that evening, Grace went to her office to write a speech for an upcoming interview. But her pen stopped halfway. She looked out the window, watching rain fall again. She walked outside and stood in it. The drops were cool against her face. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We did it, Mom. Your story is safe now." The rain kept falling, soft and endless. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled gently, almost like an answer. Alina joined her, laughing as she lifted her hands to the sky. "You're going to catch a cold." Grace smiled through the rain. "Then you'll have to take care of me." David came out too, holding an umbrella. "You both are crazy," he said, smiling. Grace shook her head. "No, just happy." The three of them stood there under the rain, laughing. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was life. Years later, the Naomi Foundation spread to 15 countries. Thousands of children found homes, schools, and love under Naomi's name. Grace became the global director. Alina ran programs across Africa. David retired, spending his mornings tending to the garden where Naomi's tree now stood tall and proud. Every year on Naomi's birthday, they held a celebration under that tree. They'd hang small paper hearts on the branches, each one with a message written by a child. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for saving us. Grace always stood at the center, reading one of her mother's letters aloud. One year, she read, "If you ever doubt who you are, look around. The people you've touched will remind you." She looked up at the children smiling, the volunteers clapping, and Alina wiping her tears. Grace smiled. "I don't doubt anymore, Mom. I know who we are. We're yours." The wind passed through the leaves gently, carrying laughter and love through the air. The rain clouds gathered far away, but no one was afraid of them anymore. The rain had taken Naomi's life once, but now it gave her story forever. Grace looked at the sky and whispered one last time, "When the rain stops, I'll see you again." And as the drops began to fall, it felt like the world itself smiled. If this story touched your heart, stay close and subscribe for more.